Europe. Many of you probably, when you think Czech Republic, you might say Czechoslovakia, and it used to be Czechoslovakia, but now it's just Czech Republic, and Slovakia is its own country. And so Czech Republic is surrounded by Austria, Germany, Poland, and Slovakia.
And let's talk about the people. So if we want to make some general, we'll just call them general analogies. We'll use fruit. Americans are like peaches and Czechs are like coconuts. So Americans tend to be smiling, tend to be happy, tend to be warm and oh, welcome, and so forth. And yeah, fuzzy on the outside. And then you get to a certain point and you kind of don't want to push beyond that because we have our walls and our boundaries, and you can be in our house, but just kind of, this is it, okay? That's more typical of Americans. Not all, but many. Czechs, on the other hand, are a bit more like coconuts. They're hard on the outside, and there's a reason for this. You live through 40 years of communism, and it messes with your psyche. So they tend to be hard on the outside, but once you're there, once you develop a relationship with them, once they decide that they're going to trust you, it's like you get inside and there's like all kinds of good stuff on the inside. And that's a difference, I would say. So it's a little slower there, relationally.
Liz, can you illustrate, Brent talked about 40 years of communism and how that impacts the psyche. Can you illustrate for us kind of how you see that playing out?
Yeah, just a little story. In Czech Republic, we've been teaching conversational English, which is like 1 hour of English conversation, followed by half an hour of Bible lesson and application. And in our English club, one day we were talking about gratitude, because I keep a gratitude journal, write down things I'm thankful for. And I said to the students, today we have journals for you, and if you want to take one home and write things that you're grateful for, you can do that. Feel free to do that.
Check's like a good bargain.
Yeah, check's like a good bargain. Something's free, so this kind of could be enticing. But one student, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And because anything I write down, I can be held accountable for. And I said, but these are good things, so what's the problem? But for him and for some other students, the thought of having his words being held against him was more than he could bear.
I want to give two statistics that kind of highlight not only 40 years of communism, but much more history than we have time to go into today. But the two numbers are 29 and 72, and the statistics vary depending on where you look, but roughly 29% of adult Czechs believe in God. And roughly 72% of Czechs identify as being religiously unaffiliated. So it's just like not on their radar screen. It's not something that plays really much of any role in their life. They just, when they go to check the box, they're happy to just say none. Those are heartbreaking statistics.
And in my studies for that part of the world, just the effects of the 40 years of religious oppression, we could also say.
Yeah.
When I read the particular accounts, it exceeds the evil that I first imagined, or the evil that I heard of in high school even. And to have your pastor disappear, and then the replacement disappear, and then persecution come in, and historians in the room, it wasn't just religious persecution, but that's what we're talking about right now. To have a history of that, a history like at the culture level deep, where if you stick your neck out for anything, including Jesus, you might disappear. And that is still in the cultural memory, even though it's like, I'm not worried about your safety over there. But the people there remember, they can still taste it when it was that dangerous. And that is one of the things that you're pushing against, is this culture deep fear that had a real basis.
So in a culture that's so disillusioned with Christ and just suspicious of religion. What does ministry look like in that context?
Sometimes it's slow, and it takes a long time to build trust, and we very much go in as learners, learning the language, learning the culture of the people, learning the things that they are excited about, and having them be our teachers. That's kind of the starting point. Secondly, there's a realization. We've talked with Czechs. We've heard it said that it takes the typical Czech 7 years to come to faith, like once they are exposed to the gospel, and a whole string of people along the way talking with them. It's not usually like the first Christian that they meet. It's maybe 10 conversations in over 7 years. And a woman that Liz was discipling, we mentioned this statistic to her. Do you remember what her response was?
That fast? Really? I thought it was longer.
So it's not like hyperbole. It takes a long time. So that would be one thing.
One of the other things is we mentioned how we've been teaching conversational English, and when the pandemic hit, we, like everyone else in the world, went to Zoom, and we didn't know if our students would continue coming, and they did, and so we continued to have English Club over Zoom. And what was so interesting was that after we were done, we said, we're going to turn our microphone and our camera off, but you are welcome to stay in this room as long as you want. And God's made us to be in communion with Him and with other people. And that really showed this past year. And people wanted to stay in the room and just have connection. And what was so interesting is they'd be on there for an hour after the class was over, and sometimes they'd be having spiritual conversations. There was like a hunger that was there.
In most of our classes, there were kind of three groups of people. I would call them the church, the unchurched, and the de-churched. De-churched being people who maybe grew up and their parents drug them to church or whatever, and they had a bad experience and they just kind of walked away. So we've got these three groups, and our goal is to create a safe place for these three groups to talk together and to explore what a vibrant relationship with Jesus could look like in their own lives.
And that kind of thing is more or less absent in that culture. So you're setting them up for a meeting that they can't get other places.
Yeah, creating a safe place, we have a saying during our English classes, our English clubs, if there's laughter, there's learning. And so we try to make it a lighthearted place, a place where it's safe to make mistakes. We speak Czech a little bit and we butcher the language, and they laugh with us and we laugh with each other, and our guard is down. And sometimes people who are not Christians will just kind of blurt out a question and then realize, uh-oh, did I just ask an offensive question? And then they're met with acceptance and a response that's loving. And sometimes it's hard to communicate in another language about faith. So one of the best things that happens is when they ask a question and we can't communicate in our language what they need to hear in their language. And so some of the other Christians in the group, they'll just start talking, and we'll push our chairs back and we'll just start to pray. Yeah. It's like, okay, God, you do the work. We set the table. It's yours.
That's an awesome moment. Can you check me on this? I remember standing, when we were visiting, I remember standing outside your church building, and there's a sign. And do I remember correctly that the sign is a play on words? Can you explain that whole situation?
Yeah, so our church building is called Kostelna. And Kostelna is kind of, it's two words that are blended together. There's the Czech word for boiler building, which is what the building used to be. It used to bring heat and hot water to several thousand people in the surrounding high-rise apartments. And it combines the word boiler building and the word for church. So let's see, Kostel and Kotelna, or vice versa, are brought together in Kostelna. So as people walk by and they look up and they see this Kostelna, it triggers something, and it brings a little bit of curiosity, like, what is this thing?
Yeah. And it is so clever to me. Because, the Soviets, they built this city that required the centerpiece of the city, to be the boiler room. And modern technology has changed, and they don't need the boiler anymore. So God has placed you guys in the place where you're sending light to the city, where it used to send out heat to keep people
It
from
is
freezing.
such an awesome strategic location.
Yeah.
If you're going to build a building that's going to send out heat to surrounding places, you're going to put it like right in the middle of things, and that's where we are. So if you stand on the roof of our church and you look out, you see all of these high-rise apartments. There are roughly, is it 90,000? 90,000 people within about a mile of our church. Yeah.
And the room capacity is like 150 tops, right?
Typical churches are not big. They
About
don't.
30 people.
About 30 people.
Yeah.
And
And
then
our
it's,
church has planted other churches, and so that is
Awesome.
in the DNA of our
Yep.
church.
Like yeast, like the good yeast. Yep. Yeah.
Well, not everyone is called to be an overseas missionary, right? But all of us are called to live missional lives. And what does that look like to you?
Well, I think we are sitting across from two people that live such missional lives that you guys just lead the way in that, the way you use your home, your van, your everything, your time, your talents. It's just an honor to be with you guys and see how God has led you these last several years. You lead missional lives.
That's really nice. Thank you.
You want to say what your motivation is?
Well, yeah, I can say something to that. When I was 16, I felt God's call on my life for ministry. And then I came to live in New Jersey, which was a huge disappointment, no offense. I just really thought by now I'd be teaching in Africa somewhere. But a couple years ago, God really softened my heart for Monmouth County. You know that there's 10% of Monmouth County residents claim to be Christians, Protestant believers, just 10%. So that's 1 in 10 people. If you think about your neighborhood and wonder where the Christian is, it's you. And so like you have 9 people that you're responsible, 9 households that you're responsible for. And when I started to think about my life that way, then I could really get excited about living in this dark corner of the world. And, that's what we want to reach our neighbors. I don't go to work. I homeschool our kids, so my neighborhood is my mission field, and those are the people that I talk to. And so when a neighbor is having a panic attack and calls me first, and wonders, like, why do I feel better when you pray with me? That's like getting close. That's getting close to the mission of what God has for us.
Yeah. And I have, we'll both admit that we're bad at it. But I think I have 2 big motivators to try to live a missional life, not overseas, but where we are. And I don't even like to talk about the first one, and it's because I hate hell so much. I hate the idea of hell. I hate that it's a thing. And I hate that so many people are headed there. And we have the privilege to do something about it. And we have the calling to do something about it. To make disciples of the nations, both at home and far away. It's in the Bible. So I hate talking about that one because people don't want to hear about it and I don't want to talk about it, but it's a reality. And it's a reality that we are called to push against hard. And the other thing is just emotionally, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. But when we choose to live missionally, when we choose to be Jesus' feet on the ground in our neighborhoods, in our churches, then we get to have moments that nobody else gets to have. And it's a moment where we get to be with somebody at the same time that Jesus is working on their lives. And we can be with people when they come to Christ and their soul is saved forever. We can be with people when they're physically healed. And they're like, what just happened? And we don't get to have those experiences if we're not chasing after God's will in our lives. And we do get to have those experiences if we're chasing after God's will in our lives. And it means saying no to some things. It means saying no to a lot of things.
Well, and I think that's something that we are admittedly bad about, but are striving towards, is trying to live with some margin, so that when somebody does pop in on us, it doesn't foul up every other aspect of our lives. So just living with some space for God to move and not being so rushed. You guys talked about the book that you read.
The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, a pastor in Portland.
That sounds like a book I'm really going to hate, but we'll have to read. It's like one of those books you're like, "Argh, there's no way I could do this." But living with margin is something that we are like trying to do more of.
And I think as we look in the mirror, there are kind of three things, and it's good alliteration. Our time, our talents, and our treasures. So look at your calendar. Does your calendar reflect the kingdom of God and kingdom realities? Our talents, the abilities that we have, are we using the things that God has made us for, whether it's being like good with numbers or good with languages or good with